One of the guys walked out of the house, rolled up the drop sheet, went out into the grass and shook all the stuff into the grass. The dust went on the BMW, and that's the only thing he remembers. He doesn't remember the beautiful craftsmanship we're actually dealing with, employing people in and out of jail, on drugs, you're lending things, you're having guys steal from you. That's reality. But the regulators poster over here saying you need someone to come to work with everything perfect, otherwise you'll get your bum kicked as an employer. We're seeing business owners that I think are reasonable people, but they didn't know the compliance properly, being sent to jail. The thing that surprised me the most was how it actually works.
Welcome to Tradies Who Lead, the podcast bringing practical leadership to every tradie. I'm Ashley Baltecki, a diesel mechanic by trade and your host. Every episode you'll hear from tradies across all industries sharing how they apply leadership in their role regardless of their title or experience. Real stories, real people, so you can learn from them and level up your leadership on site. In this episode, we're making the case that safety and leadership aren't two separate conversations, and the standards you set, how you set them, are just as important as the compliance documents you sign. Today's guest is Luke Canham, founder of Multiply Me, and a man who has spent over 30 years leading people across high-risk industries, including construction and scaffolding. Luke has managed hundreds of staff across multiple sites, and along the way he came to a realization that changed everything. Every business is a training business, whether it knows it or not. Now Luke is on a mission to help business owners and supervisors across the trades build culture where safety isn't just enforced, it's understood. Through short, sharp, social media style video training delivered straight to workers' phones, he's changing the ways teams learn, retain information, and make better decisions on the job. His work sits right at the intersection of leadership, culture, and safety. And the conversation we're about to have is one every leader in the trades needs to hear. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Ash. It's good fun.
The first question I ask all the guests on the podcast is, what does leadership mean to you?
It's a big question, isn't it? Leadership for me, I think, is broken into two parts. And the first one is always about getting a group of people to move in a direction. So whether it's a new policy that you've brought in or an activity you're doing, but everyone willingly completing that task and moving together. And I think the key word is willingly, because a lot of leaders can get people to do something or comply, but most of the people that are complying are thinking, well, we don't even believe in this. So that's the difference for leadership for me on that side of things. And the other one is the leader needs to live and breathe what he's preaching. So if he's saying, hey boys, we all wear hard hats on site, well, he's got to do it too. And then it just creates that, okay, somebody said this, everyone else is doing it, that's the way we roll. There's not double standards. So those are two kind of cores to what leadership means to me.
Where did your leadership journey begin?
This is a really good question. When I was early on building apprenticeship, started my own business, had a few guys, and I feel like early on I was the worst leader and the worst kind of teacher, where I thought I knew how to do everything really well my way. So if somebody needed to be shown how to put up a gutter bracket or something, I'd be like, bang, 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 that's how you do it, and then move off and expect them just to follow. And it took a lot of time to realize that you can physically show someone how to do it, but then you need to stand back, let them do it, and you need to go through the process and let them make the mistakes. You can't just see it and then do it straight away. That was sort of one learning where I felt like over time I started to go, okay, there's more ways of getting the job done than just my way. So even if I'd showed someone, it was then stepping back and saying, that's how we want to get to the other side. If you've got a different way to get there in the middle, that's great. And it's kind of like a footy field, right? You've got your two sidelines, you've got a goal at the other end. You basically set them up and say, right, here's your job. You just got to score at the other end, but you've got some guidelines. And that actually made it easier on me, and I think a whole lot better on the people I was training or employing, because they're like, okay, I don't have to do it this specific way because I don't even believe it should be done that way. So that's probably where I started.
I think we can fall into that trap as tradies, especially when we're going from being an apprentice to then being the tradesperson, is we want to be in control, where unless someone kind of teaches us or we stumble across a more effective way, we struggle to kind of learn or be taught that there's a different way of guiding people and giving them those guardrails rather than just being in control of everything they do in a specific way of doing things when there's more than one way to get the job done and still get it done well and safely.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're in that zone, it's your way. This is how we do things. Everyone around you they can't grow, and then they start walking on eggshells, and they're like, well, if I can never do it right, well, why would I try? So if you don't figure it out, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're never really going to go anywhere as a supervisor or leader, unfortunately.
In terms of creating that environment where you can let go of some of that control, because I think for many of us, we're a bit afraid, or there's a bit of fear that if we let go of control, that everything will go wrong. And it's not that mistakes can be fully avoided, but we think that we can avoid mistakes if we're in control. Whereas we know that human error occurs and mistakes are going to happen no matter what. But how do you actually create the accountability with your team so that you can let go of that control and it doesn't turn into that mess that we fear it will be?
The mess that it could be is what's driving us to not let go, obviously. I mean, from my experience personally, you're a good tradesman, you care about people, you care about your tools, you care about everything so much that's why you get work and then you grow. And then when you employ people and you get bigger, it's very hard to be that person who handshakes everyone, does everything, so you can't be there. So that's definitely when the letting go needs to happen. I've been going through a lot of letting go lately as well. The business that I'm in now, not construction, more software related, but I constantly get told, Luke, we can do it. And there's just that fear that's always there. It's like, well, okay, sit down, let's talk about this. What this actually means when they say they can do it, it might be that they can see 3/4 of the project, but you might be able to see more of that project and you're thinking 5 years ahead. So every kind of clink or damage here could be a Google review or something that damages what you've built at the start. So I think when you're letting go, what I've done recently is sitting down and having those big heart-to-hearts and saying, I'm fine to let go, but this is the way I see it. It's not just what we see here on a day-to-day. Like these decisions we're making, happy to let go, but please understand what that decision makes. It's not a bad Google review, it's a damaged $100,000 pipeline. And I think that's where, if you're letting go, you just need to have those real conversations. And 9 times out of 10, when you let go, boom, somebody grows. They're like, wow, I got some freedom, and they grow. And you're like, oh, wow, we should have done that earlier.
I love that, especially because seeing the big picture, it's something that you often have to develop with time, or it takes people actually taking the time to help you see more layers that go beyond just the job task that you do day to day as an apprentice, as a tradesperson, sometimes even as a supervisor. But there's so much value in seeing the big picture beyond just, here's a job I need to get done and it needs to be done in this time frame and to the standard. And it does change sometimes the decisions that we can make as individuals, or even sometimes when we don't like decisions, we can have more empathy for the decision because we actually understand the big picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So a builder I was speaking with, they went in, did a renovation, amazing job, put the drop sheets down, did everything really perfectly. We're building a great relationship. And one day, one of the guys walked out of the house, rolled up the drop sheet, went out into the grass and shook all the stuff into the grass. The dust went on the BMW, the chips, everything's in the grass. And that's the only thing he remembers. He doesn't remember the beautiful craftsmanship that they've just done. He's telling his friends, we got these builders, but they put dust on the BMW and I can't believe that they threw the screws in the grass. Now I got to go pick them up before I mow. So that's the kind of high level thinking that's such a little issue, it may seem. And he thought he was doing it right, got all the dust out of the house and put it on the grass, because that's what he'd probably do at home, right?
It's so true for the experience people have of us as well as an individual or a team member, that there's these things that we might not think are that important, but that do have an impact on our relationships or how people perceive our actions or our care factor. And when we think about culture and safety, those are built on those behaviors, the small things and the big things that shape how we show up in a team or in a workplace. And from a safety point of view, our industry has a pretty solid understanding of how to be safe, obviously what paperwork is involved, what the requirements are from a compliance point of view. So we know to wear gloves, wear safety glasses, don't be alone on site when you're doing high risk work, a whole range of things. But we often don't think about some of those behaviors that affect our social and mental safety in the workplace. So I'm wondering, is it possible to have a strong safety culture without a strong culture?
Good question. This goes back to what I said at the start. Maybe you can have strong safety culture because you're prodding everyone with a cattle prodder with an electric zap on the end. So everyone's like, well, I do it. There's penalties if I don't. So what I would question is, were you ever sat down and explained, hey, this is why we do the pre-start. The regulations are like this. We've had an incident where pre-start wasn't done and this guy lost his hand. Was all of that kind of rolled into it to say, Hash, this is why we do the pre-starts. This is how we do them now. If you could even see a better way to do these, is there a better day we should do them on or a time? We'd love to hear that. If that happens, I'd love to hear your answer on that.
I think working in big business, there would have been that conversation at least once around the big picture and why we're doing what we're doing. But after a certain point, it just becomes routine.
Another question for you. I've turned this around, sorry. So let's call it a cattle prodder. So if you do something wrong, you get performance managed. So were you fearing the cattle prodder, or were you believing in the process and going, hey, I know why I should do this, I'll just get it done? Was it the fear driving you to get it done, or the belief in the system to get it done?
As an apprentice especially, I liked to follow the rules. So for a lot of it probably was more of just, oh, I understand this is good for my safety, and also I don't want to get in trouble. But there would definitely be times when I think we all have opinions about that step is overkill. I can be safe without that. Whether it's not wearing the face shield and just wearing the safety glasses. Those little things where it's, well, if I could get away with it and not get busted, I might not use that equipment. But if I was going to get busted, then I'd follow it because it was like, well, I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah. Key thing you just said. So you asked me, can you have a strong safety culture without culture? You just said then if you might bend the rules if you didn't believe in it or thought that it could be bent. So I think that's the answer to what we're talking about here. To have a willing, strong safety culture, there has to be a good culture in the background of explaining stuff, getting contribution. I know all that takes time to get all those conversations happening, which is kind of why I'm in the business I'm in now. But the answer is, yes, you can have a strong safety culture, but the people are going to be unhappy unless you have a great culture behind it to support, hey, this is how we roll and why.
So I know when we first connected, you shared a story about what's shaping the work you do today. And it was one of those safety incidents that no one really thinks it'll happen to them. So could you share a bit about that story and how it's shaped what you're doing now?
Yeah, so the experience you're talking about there was we had a subcontractor roofer, jumped up on the roof, was working near a power line. He had a metal roof batten in his hand and slid it over the scaffold out into the street to work, like cut a miter on one end. And that bridged the gap that was there, and he was electrocuted. He didn't pass away, but look, regardless of all that happened, it's a situation no one wants to go through. What I always speak about, it's more about, well, what happens to the business? How could you have prevented that? And really that's what investigators and WorkSafe want to see as well. Accidents happened, that's horrible, but how can we use this to do better? Is it something we can learn from? How does the business improve? How does the whole industry improve from that? And obviously at the start, there was a lot of wondering how this happened, what happens to them, what happens to me. A lot of months when I would come home on the stairs and cry to my wife, I would literally come home and break down every afternoon for like months and just say, I can't do this. The realities here of what we're actually dealing with, employing people in and out of jail, on drugs, you're putting breathalyzers in your trucks so you can get guys to actually use them. You're giving cash advances, you're lending things, you're having guys steal from you. That's reality. But the regulators' posts are over here saying you need someone to come to work with their hard hat on, their teeth brushed, their everything perfect. Otherwise, you'll get your bum kicked as an employer. That gap is horribly terrifying.
I often think about this as someone who's not across the compliance level of workplace health and safety, is that across our industries, there is this ongoing growth of paperwork volume, of policies and procedures, and they serve a purpose. But my concern is always that our focus on the paperwork can often miss the point where that paperwork is only ever as strong as how it is implemented, and how well it is implemented entirely comes down to people and whether they're personally invested in that or not. And like I just said, there were certain things that if there wasn't a boss who could walk out into the workshop and catch me not doing the right thing, we all can have that tendency to want to cut corners on some of these things when we don't personally buy into it or understand why we need to comply with those rules. And so when I think of all this paperwork, whether it's for physical safety, mental and emotional safety, we often forget to allow for that people factor and that human error. And amongst all this, there is so much liability for leaders around how well their team actually applies this paperwork. And it's obviously something that you've experienced firsthand. So what is it that you're doing now to support businesses and to support leaders with that liability of, are their teams demonstrating safe behaviours for the whole team's well-being, but also from a compliance point of view?
This is where my passion lays right now, because we went through a 10-year experience to deal with that accident. And at the end of that, I was walking out of the courtroom and I was like, this is messed up. This whole system, the amount of what you go through, and obviously the other family went through stuff as well, but what you go through as a business is arduous. When I came out, I was like, something's got to be done. And it kind of just lit a fire. And I was like, right, let's work out how to do this. Not immediately, but it was something that I thought, mums and dads will go to jail. And really that's where we're sitting now. We're seeing business owners that I think are reasonable people, but they didn't know the compliance properly, being sent to jail. Now that's huge. So I sold my scaffold company around about when that court case finished. And then I went into business coaching, and I was coaching other scaffold owners, builders and so on. And I had a lot to give, but they were doing the same mistakes I was. They have a near miss, they pull the guys together, they have a chat, everyone signs the paper and everyone goes back to work, but nothing changes. And then they get 5 new staff the next week or month, and they missed all of that meeting. So they go make the same mistakes. Business owners, supervisors going crazy because they're like, we talked about this last month. Yeah, boss, but half the crew wasn't employed last month. So that kind of spiraled me to think, well, how do you collect all this stuff, collect all the good content in a company, all those toolbox talks, whatever, and then make them available all the time? And we also did a lot of work around social media. It was like, well, social media is king. Like you can get someone to buy a pair of shoes that they've never put on for $300 off a short video. And that's influence. So we come back to leadership. That, let's say you've got a short video where someone's gone, hey, I bought these shoes, they're awesome. And someone taps press, I'll pay $300 for those shoes because I really believe in this. And I thought, well, if they can do that from a 20-second pitch, why can't we deliver safety in short form video that influences people to make the right decisions, especially when we're not there? You could think of this as an internal social media system, but if they watch a video in Multiply Me, it's called compliance.
I really like that you have created a new way of training a team. And I especially think of apprentices in our industries, and so often as tradespeople, as supervisors, we're training these people without really being given the skills to mentor and train well. And obviously this type of training delivery doesn't rely on the actual training skills of anyone in the workforce. But what's been the part that's been most surprising about delivering training in this way?
The thing that surprised me the most was how it actually works. We've created an AI guy called Toolbox Tom. He's a little cartoon character. He's everybody's best friend, and he's awesome. He speaks like us. He doesn't quite swear, but he definitely got a lot of banter, and he speaks like an Aussie tradie. And the stories he shares are a lot of stories that happen to me. Like they're actual legitimate things that happen on site. They're not the old white card construction course that you do that's like a beautiful construction site with a guy with a hard hat that's never been near dirt. So we've created this little character that everyone is stuck in their head now. We now get consistent information back saying, hey, the boys love these. They're influencing them to make decisions. One lady recently, she said, Luke, the guys come back to the sheds after the day and they're talking about, oh, Toolbox Tom wouldn't do this, he wouldn't do that. And that's influence. They've remembered something enough to talk about it and now made it part of their culture. How cool is that?
That's incredible. And I love that because of the storytelling delivery, rather than like a tick box of here's the 5 steps, that this training has ultimately become a part of the team, and that storytelling has created this culture where there's ongoing conversation about safety. For leaders or business owners who want to develop their own influence, not necessarily just in the context of safety and compliance, but in terms of building those strong relationships to have a high-performing team and helping their team work within the guidelines of that footy field, what would be your advice or your tips about how to actually develop that influence?
Well, I would lead a little bit towards video as well, because we're seeing it seems to have a different impact. If you're having a traditional toolbox talk, most people are disengaged, and it really frustrates people. Something that we've done on our platform is actually bring in a team of contributors. Now, contributors are already industry speakers that talk about mental health for tradies, lifting coaches, respiratory companies that talk about silica and how to fit your mask and how to clean it properly. So leaders that were struggling with how do I get all these messages out? How do I create influence? They've been able to go, well, wow, multiply me sitting here with a team of like key videos and influence building videos. Plus they've got a whole team of people that are experts in their fields that have videos here as well that they can bring in to support themselves. So we've seen leaders and supervisors say, wow, that's like half the stuff I need to talk about delivered in an expert way, because all supervisors are not experts in everything. But when they're a supervisor, they somehow get tasked with, hey, all of a sudden you need to know everything. And I think that creates fear around supervisors and leaders because they're not supposed to know everything. They're supposed to facilitate everyone getting the information and get to the other end. So half of that question is look at systems, like how could you help systems allow you to be in more places and communicate more? And we've definitely done that with our system. The other side of it again is talk to the boys and girls that are in your team. This is horrible. I have a story here for you. We had someone come to a demo recently and they said in the demo, Luke, I don't even leave my office. I don't even want to see the people. He goes, I just need them because we need to get the jobs done. And in my head, I'm thinking, I don't know if we can work together. So there's people out there that have businesses, but they're not engaged with their team. Like that's not how it works. So making sure you jump in with the team. And if you're not going to go and do a bit of work with them, at least go and see them. So that will definitely buy you some credit to say, well, okay, boss can do this too.
Obviously with this training, like you said, it's alleviating the workload off your supervisors so that some of that communication that they have to pass on, that's time that's now freed up so they can actually go and get to know their people, get to know their teams, because that relationship piece and understanding your people is where that influence comes from. And that really shows how having people on the same page and understanding the big picture, whether it's around safety, whether it's around processes, whether it's around change in a business, that getting people on the same page makes it so much easier to get people on board and to understand the why of the things that are happening. And it doesn't mean that they have to agree or disagree, but because they can understand and they can at least embrace and get on board with that.
Yeah, absolutely. The rollouts we're doing at the moment with our software, years ago, we would hand over the software a couple of meetings and get them up and running. But we've seen that the implementation is more important than the software, to be honest. You can have the best software, implemented poorly, full of gaps, doesn't work. So what we've been doing now is when we implement Multiply Me, we actually have a meeting with the supervisors, business owners, and I actually talk to them. I'm like, hey guys, I'm a chippy. This is what we went through. This is what happened in court. This is the responsibility on your business's shoulders. This is the responsibility on your shoulders. And I just bring up ChatGPT or Google and say, if I'm a supervisor, I work for a company, someone gets hurt, could I go to jail? And it says yes. So when we bring all of that up and I say, guys, we're here to help you and your business achieve what you need to with these legal goalposts. The business is not asking you to do this, the regulators are. And once everybody understands that and they're like, oh, this has actually been one of the most strongest hard-hitting meetings, but I get it now. And we walk out of that meeting, I feel like sometimes brutal because I've had to bring that kind of heavy talk, but I'm helping the company push their own wheelbarrow to say, hey, this is not the business preaching you need to do these checks and balances. It's the regulator pushing them to do it. So getting everyone on board like that as well.
We could talk for hours about all sorts of things around safety and compliance and leadership, because there is just so much information here that is so important for businesses and for leaders who might be working within these businesses and are unaware of how much liability they have potentially in terms of how well they lead and support safety and compliance in their teams. In the spirit of everything that we've discussed, what would be your advice to tradies or trade businesses or trade leaders about how they can practice leadership every day?
So a couple of things I can speak to this on. I felt like when I grew my business, 3 staff was fun because you're all mates. When you get to 6 staff, everything breaks because you've got to split into 2 teams, and you've got to have people that are not under your complete watch. So that hurts. So I would say when you're kind of growing, you get to that 6 staff mark, that's a break moment unless you start to look for support, supervisor and systems. And then I found you go from 6 to 12 pretty comfortably, but 12 again, you break again because you're kind of splitting. As you go through those journeys, that what you're doing today, if you're growing, it's not going to be what you're doing when you've got more people. You've got to start looking for systems. I've had business coaches all of my life. Up until recently, this is really key, I'm using ChatGPT now as a coach, Claude as well. So we use that as we would have used an actual mentor in the past. And I feel like it's exceeding how we were mentored. And the reason is because mentors have one strategy, one approach, one experience in life. Whereas if you set up a GPT to coach you, it's fantastic. So again, to give that advice back is to just make sure that you're understanding that stuff changes. Support yourself with the right people or systems, combination of both probably. And I think at the end of the day that finding that balance between regulator and reality and becoming okay with where you sit. Now, this might be a little bit touchy because people are going to say, oh, you have to do everything by the book. Now, if they've been in the real world and been on the tools, there's going to be gaps. I'm not saying I condone that. I'm just saying that's where reality is. So I struggled a lot with always feeling sick over the fact that there was a couple of things that weren't done perfectly. And I think you've just got to find a space where you're like, we're managing this business really well. The guys are supported. Finding where you sit in that level of how you want to run your business, like nowhere near the cowboy side, please, like right up near the 90, 100%, but just finding the spot and then being okay to keep going it there instead of beating yourself up all the time.
That's a really great closing note to really showcase that there is this continuous improvement, not only as leaders, but as businesses around safety. And even the things that should be black and white aren't always quite so clean cut. And we've really just got to be comfortable and continue improving in our safety, in our leadership, in our relationships, so that we make sure that we are doing our best, knowing that our best will always get better with time and more knowledge and more experience. So thank you so much for everything you've shared on the podcast today, Luke. I've learned a lot about safety and learning and having influence as a leader and the way that that is changing. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
No, it's been awesome, Ash. Thank you for the chat. Good questions. It's been really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another tradie diving into how they practice leadership in the trades. If you enjoyed this episode, tap like, subscribe to Tradies Who Lead, or follow us on socials for more stories from the voices you hear on the show.